Well, hello and a big theatrical welcome to you. We're fast approaching the end of year. So that can only mean one thing. It's showtime. Yes, this is the perfect opportunity. The end of year shows, preparing an end of year production, small production with our students gives them the perfect opportunity to showcase their public speaking skills and their fluency to a live audience. But end of year shows can also be a little bit stressful for teachers, especially because a lot of teachers aren't actors, they're not directors, they're not script writers or makeup artists, so it all can be a little bit overwhelming. And so where do we start? Well, before we actually start getting our students actually performing on stage, what can be helpful to start with is to actually learn and understand what kind of theatre do young children enjoy? What kind of theatre do they go to? I mean, now today with apps and YouTube and video games, are children still interested in going to the theatre? What gets them engaged? What makes them laugh? What bores them? Well, today we're going to find all that out. Hello, I'm Miranda and I teach young children English as a second language through drama. And today I have a very special guest with me all the way from Wales in the UK who is going to come and share his experience as a professional actor. In fact, in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to Sean Jones, who I have known for many, many years. I first met him 30 years ago when we both studied at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. And Sean is a professional actor. He is a musician and he is an expert in children's musical theatre and pantomime. Panto. What is Panto? Well, in a few minutes, we're going to find out because I'm going to ask that question right to Sean. And Sean is going to come and he's going to share some secrets of what it's like actually to perform for young children. The do's and the don'ts of how to captivate young children's attention and, more importantly, how to maintain it too. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Sean Jones. Drum roll, and here he is. Yeah, Sean, it is so great to see you. We're both a little bit older, aren't we? A little bit older, a little bit wiser.
Well, I don't know about that. Definitely older for me.
Sean, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing with us your experience as a performer, especially with children's musical theatre, because I know that you have spent many, many years doing pantomime. Now, before we start, because a lot of people don't actually know what pantomime is, can you give us an idea of what your interpretation, what is British pantomime?
Oh, it's such a hard one to explain to somebody who's never experienced one. I think the best way that I could explain it is imagine a children's production of a fairy tale, but add lots of songs, add lots of talking to the audience, add some men who are dressed as women, add some women who are dressed as men, add lots of slapstick comedy and romance and maybe some famous people off the telly.
Okay.
And it is essentially, you can hear that it's going from being a show almost into something like cabaret because it's so interactive with the audience. I think that's the best way that I could describe it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's really it's like a British tradition, isn't it? Because pantomime is usually performed around a specific time of the year. It's usually not all year round. It's around a specific time of the year, a magical time of the year for young children, which is around Christmas and New Year, isn't it?
Yeah, and it has become a tradition for families to go and see pantos with their children and stuff. And we're talking, when we say tradition, pantomime is probably one of the oldest British theatre traditions. It goes way back to the 1600s and the early Commedia dell'arte troupes. So we actually have a lot of influence, really, from Italy. A lot of the original pantomime stories were very based on the original Commedia dell'arte stories. So, and the stock characters were pretty similar. So clown, and pantaloon and stuff, they all kind of derive from the Commedia dell'arte. So throw that in with a lot of drunk British theatre goers in the 17 and 1800s, and it just became this anarchic theatre form which has just gone on, and it never changes a huge amount. I mean, originally they were all in verse, but
Okay.
even now, traditionally, the good fairy and the wicked fairy will always speak in verse. Sometimes the villain will only speak in verse, and that tradition goes back all the way to Commedia dell'arte. It's so when you're doing panto, you do feel this weight of tradition on your shoulders. That it has been going for a few hundred years. And I've got some old scripts of it as well from from the early 1800s. I don't get any of the jokes now.
Well, that's not funny.
Well,
that's not funny, is it? That's not funny.
but that's the thing, because that's the other thing that I forgot to mention. They will always have a topical references to modern day. So obviously, this year there will be lots of jokes about Boris Johnson.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, there were lots of jokes about Donald Trump. And it's funny that, it's if you go back to even in the 1800s, there are a lot of jokes of the day that are connected with what was going on politically at the time. So it's even that tradition remains.
So that's really interesting, actually, because the panto today is really directed at young children of all ages, but the whole range of ages. But still, even today, there are still some references also for adults. I mean, that's really typical also of if you go to see any cartoon films for kids as well. There are a lot of the Disney films, for example. There are lots of they're directed to young children, but there are some references that are more guided also to the older audience members, because they're the ones that are taking the kids. It has to be interesting for them too. So that's really interesting, actually.
Well, and there is the sort of like the start of kind of about engaging with it. Whenever we're in rehearsals, my character particularly, because I'm always the silly one, I'm always the funny one.
Can I show everybody while you're talking? I'm just going to show people a few pictures of you while you're explaining.
Doing my serious performing, yes.
Your serious performance. So we're talking about serious theatre here, and here you are being as serious as you possibly can. Sure.
Yes.
I mean, just look at that lighting and the costumes. Sorry, you were saying about your character.
Yeah, because my character is always silly, and he's kind of like the kid's friend. So my humour is always aimed towards them. And interesting, if you look
I mean, I've
still got that inflatable thing. It's in my wardrobe right behind me.
We have to put it on later. I mean, that's just amazing.
Well, I mean, it creates a massive impact, something like that, as soon as you walk on stage. But yeah, I've always felt that the more I can make my character friends with the kids and keep on their level, the better. There are other characters in a panto, like in the lady that was dancing with me a minute ago, who was clearly a man in a dress. His jokes, that fella there, Quinn, playing my mum, his jokes are a lot more adult orientated, so they would go right over the children's heads.
Okay.
So there is always an element in panto of double entendre, double meaning jokes, and I always find that it's a really, really sensitive balancing act with panto, because the adults expect a little bit of it. It's not really smutty. It's more like old seaside, comedy humor. It's not, you know, like the Carry On films type humor. But if it gets too much like that, it totally alienates the children.
In fact, this is what I was going to ask you. This is a really, really good point, actually, because the young children, Panto is a really big thing in the UK. All of the parents always take their young kids there. What kind of things do you actually use to engage initially with the young audience? Is there something specific that you do to warm them up? Is there some kind of way that you use your energy or your body language? Because you obviously got really, really young children in the audience who will get bored, obviously, really, really quickly. Their attention spans are very, very short.
Yeah.
So what kind of things do you do to engage the young audience?
Well, your first entrance in Panto as the comic is huge, because you are literally running out there to be the audience's best friend, and they have to. There I am, basically running out there saying, "Love me, please love me." And I'm required with my Panto company. I actually have to write my entrance. So that's the other thing with Panto is I write a lot of my own jokes. I write my my entrance for the character, and it's normally a few paragraphs of the basis of it is. So, for instance, this year I'm Buttons in Cinderella, and I will go out there and say, "Hello, boys and girls. My name is Buttons. I work up at the castle, and I'm in love with Cinderella." Those are the three main points. So I have to turn that into a minute and a half, 2 minutes comedy routine, which might not sound much, but when you're on your own on stage, feels a long time if you're not getting any laughs.
Absolutely. If you're not getting any.
So what I did last year, for instance, was I had a look at what was relevant at the time, and obviously there'd been a Bond film had come out with Daniel Craig, and who we remember, and so I thought, well, the kids have all been to see the Bond film, or if they haven't, they've certainly been aware of James Bond. So I got myself a tuxedo, and got some of my friends to work on it, some of my costume makers to work on it. So I came on, you know, suddenly the lights go down, and with the lights and with the lighting, I come on with the tuxedo, and I say, and my character last year was called Louis Laplanque.
Okay.
Classic Panto name, because we were in France. And I came to the front of the stage, went, "The name's Plonk," and these two girl dressers ripped the costume off me, and that costume that I'm wearing with the funny hat on, I was wearing that underneath. So it was an instant impact. So that really helped.
Were you wearing this, Sean? That was your costume, was it?
That was for that was Peter Pan. That was, yeah. That was,
so it wasn't your James Bond impression there then?
No, it was yeah.
I think I prefer this one though, Sean. Fantastic. I mean, this is what's so interesting is that as you said, the first impact, because that's very similar to how when we're actually teaching a young class of students, even that first impact, as you said now, when you come onto the stage, whether it is with an audience of native language speakers or whether you're a teacher with non-native language speakers, that first impact that you make with students is really, really important to grab their attention. And with pantomime as well, there is a lot of participation that is required from the audience, isn't it? Because you're telling lots of jokes, you're doing lots of gags, you're doing lots of slapstick comedy, which is really physical and obvious comedy that children absolutely love. How do you actually, because I know from myself, from my experience with Panto as well as a kid, I remember the actors would say, "Okay, who's going to come on stage?" Because in Panto, you actually ask students to come up onto the stage and interact with the actors on stage. Do you have any problems with getting young children up onto the stage when you ask for their participation? What do you actually do?
Well, what we tend to do on a practical level, we make sure that the front of house staff know which kids are going to come up, so that we don't have a million kids running for. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. Back at Liverpool Empire in the 1970s, I went to watch Cilla Black in Panto, famous British singer, and it was Cannon and Ball were the comedians, and it was before they kind of got British fame. Cannon and Ball guys they were a British comedy double act that were very famous in the 1970s and 1980s. So
I remember them well.
Yeah, I do too. I was a big fan of Cannon and Ball, and when they were I'd been to see enough pantos to know when it was getting to the point where they got people up on stage. So, and it would always be my birthday in January. So it would always be my birthday trip. So as we were getting to that bit, I would be out of my seat, age 7 or 8, running down the aisle, being chased by the front of house ushers to grab me to take me back to my seat, because I was dying to get on stage with Cannon and Ball and various other people. I think I did go on. I can't remember that bit. I remember being chased.
Did you ever make it up on stage?
I think I did a couple of times.
They dragged you off by your feet.
Yeah. No, and this is the thing: when you get it's a real skill set that you have to learn when you get children up on stage, because you're battling with their nerves. So you have to make sure that they don't, because you're trying to get some comedy value out of the kids. So I always have some kind of stock gags that I can say to them. It's like, oh, how old are you? 7. I was 7 when I was your age. Just things like that,
Okay.
that make them look stupid at you. They go, you're silly. And if they start engaging with me, then their family starts laughing, and then the audience start laughing, and and who's this? Sorry, yeah, I was going, and if there's a little boy stood next to a girl, I go, is this your wife? No. I literally just try to embarrass them, basically.
No, but that's absolutely fantastic, because what you're doing, really, this is a really important point, actually, also for language teachers, is that using humor with young children to help them relax. It's something that we talk a lot about, actually, with other teachers, is that actually using humor in the classroom is really, really important, because when actually the same thing as young children coming up on a stage, it's the same thing when you have new students in a classroom learning a different language that is not their own. They're feeling uptight, they're feeling apprehensive, and when you use some kind of humor and silliness, as you said now, to actually help them relax, immediately they do feel more relaxed and more prone to be more open and to try out new things. And in this sense, here up on the stage of actually acting out something with you actors on the stage in Panto.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. It's all about disarming them. And luckily for me, by that point in the show, because we call it the song sheet, because my character will come on once the story is kind of finished, once the lovers have got together, once the baddie has been defeated, good triumphs over evil, all of the other parts run off and get put in their nice costumes for the walk down at the end for the bows.
Okay.
So while and the whole set is being changed behind me, so it's the phrase that we use in British theatre is front cloth, because obviously the very front cloth comes down and I come in front of it and I go, hello, boys and girls. Have you enjoyed yourself? Have you enjoyed yourself? Start talking to them. And I'm basically waffling while they're waiting to try it. All the technical guys are moving bits of furniture.
Something like, well, you would be in front of the front curtain while they'd be like sorting out
like all those sets behind me would be getting moved into the wings. They'd be bringing on a nice big staircase. All the nice sparkly costumes would be getting thrown on, and I kind of tend to get a bit of a thumbs up from there's me as buttons. I tend to get a bit of a thumbs up from the crew guys to say, yes, you can finish now. So then I finish my little song and off I go. so basically, all the getting the kids up, and I do a little song for the audience. I sometimes write my own little silly songs. I think one of my favourites that I wrote was called "Please Don't Pick Your Nose," and
I'm sure they love that.
well, it's silly, isn't it? It's silly, and it had all hand
Makes me
gestures,
laugh.
just like I get the whole audience up on their feet, get them singing along, and then once they're really warmed up, I realise that I can go and get changed into my sparkly costume. So I run off, everything's being thrown off me, and I'm getting out, and then I have to come down at the end as if by magic. So that point in the show is totally unscripted, and apart from any song
Sure.
that I might have, it is basically me just having a bit of a giggle with the audience and giving
So
the
you're
kids a little present.
improvising completely.
Yeah. And
That's
because of
amazing.
that, you don't know what the kids are going to give you, and you have to be ready to, to do something with it. Like, for instance, one year there was a little girl, and I said, "What's your name?" She said, "Alexa," and I went, "Oh, hang on a minute, Alexa, turn off the lights." And the front of house guys switched the lights off. So it was,
No! Amazing.
if everybody is on the ball, it
Yeah.
can work really well. Sometimes you come
So you
off
have to
and
have
you
it
go,
really listening in.
sometimes you come off and think, "Oh, I wish I'd said that. Oh, that I could have said that. I could have done that. I could have said that." But you literally just have to be as, as Ken Ray as possible, just warm and generous and listening and improvising,
But that's
uh,
amazing, actually, and quite nerve-wracking for some people who usually would depend a lot on a script. I mean, when you're usually doing a normal play, you
yeah,
wouldn't, for adults, you would never improvise because you have your script, you have to follow your script because then the other actors have their cues to then carry on with the script. So I think Panto is
yeah.
like a world on its own, isn't it? Where you can really do whatever you want. You just got to have all of the other actors and the stage hands really there listening in. As just that example that you made with Alexa is just absolutely fantastic. They put the lights out. I bet that brought the house down with
Yeah,
laughter.
it was great. It was just, it's one of those moments that you go, "Oh, thank gosh for that. That really worked." But going back to what you were saying about how terrifying it is, my first panto that I did, which was about 10 or 11 years ago, I had done a little panto, a little sort of small theatre panto, where, as you said, I had the script and there was no deviation from it. It was just, that was the script, beginning, middle, and end, and it was, that's just what it was. And even what looked like ad libs were actually in the script. Whereas this panto script came on because I moved to this sort of like higher level of commercial panto, and the script came, and my opening was written, and but the bit at the end for the song sheet, there was nothing there. It just said song sheet. So I said, "Oh, when do I get that bit?" And they said, "Oh no, you come up with that." This was on the first day of rehearsals. I was terrified. I was, what? I'm not a comedian. I'm just I'm a funny actor. That's, okay. So I had to go away. I contacted some of my friends, and they just said, "Oh, it's fine. You're just basically saying, have you had a good time? Do some of your, shout outs for the audience, get some of the kids out and stuff." And it goes quite quickly. And actually, they were right. I wasn't worried. But the funny thing was, the opening bit that I said had been written for me. The producer came to see it, and he said, "Really good, Sean." He said, "Just make the opening more your own." Now, of course, if you say that to a classically trained actor, that means, well, make the part your own, embody the part, make it, And he went, "No, no, 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 make it your own, write your own." Oh, right, okay. So my first professional big panto, I had to write and it was terrifying and a proper little learning curve. But I love it. Now it's one of the reasons why I love doing panto, is I like that artistic input that I have of, I mean, don't get me wrong, when I say writing my own jokes, I'm generally stealing my own jokes and compiling them in the way that I like.
Brilliant.
Know.
No, jokes are just such a fundamental part. So you were just really thrown in the deep end, but you have a lot of artistic license there to do whatever you want and to really react to each and every audience that comes, because each and every audience is obviously going to be very different from the previous one. So it's really a talent to actually react to your audience, different audiences. It's just like with teaching, actually, when you're teaching different classes of children, you may be doing the same activity or the same drama game, for example, but each different audience, each different class will react differently. So you have to be able to react and find different strategies of maybe of changing the activity slightly depending on the reaction that you get from the audience. So that's really, really interesting, actually, how we can relate that from being on stage to actually teaching. That's a really interesting point. But Sean, if you could give a major tip to, let's imagine that you have a group of teachers, language teachers in front of you, and they are thinking about performing for, well, let's say preparing a performance for their students. Do you have any specific tips that you think that they should try and include in their shows that they're preparing for their students? Something that, from your experience from acting with young children as an audience, what kind of things do you think that they should really try to include in any performance that they do, whether they're doing a performance for their kids or they're getting their kids to do a performance on stage? Do you have anything that you think that they should, any secret ingredients that they should include?
Well, I think, I mean, I don't know if this is part of the correct answer, but one of the most important things that you can bring to a performance for children is energy. And when I say energy, I don't mean shouting and being too sort of children's television about it. It's a sort of it's a little fire inside you, that energy that really engages them, and it's making that contact with the audience so that any performance that you do, I think sometimes when we're performing in front of children, we can feel a little self-conscious, and I think we can feel a little bit shy, and children can sense that. they can sense that weakness in you, and they'll switch off. And so the more confident you are and the more energized you are, the more they will engage, without a doubt. That's so that on a performance level, it's not talking too quickly, because like anything, like in a situation like this, if you stop understanding what somebody's saying, you switch off. So when you're talking with children, you've got to be careful not to let the nerves take over and so you gabble or anything like that, because they'll lose interest if they stop listening. In terms of the type of piece that you're doing, one of the reasons that Panto works so well is there's a lot of repetition, because I think that really works for children. And if you can bring repetition to a performance, like all the best children's books do it, don't they? You know, they repeat motifs, they repeat words, they repeat all the counting things. It all helps with young minds to sort of follow the story. Because one of the things that my character always does is he always comes on stage and addresses the audience like, "Hi everyone," and they'll say, "Hi," and you set that up. So you're practicing with the audience these little things. So, and that can work in children's theatre as well, where, if I was doing Snow White, "Hello everyone, I'm Snow White. What's my name, everyone? Snow White." That's it. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. It might seem corny, but do you know what I mean? They really.
Sorry, Sean. There's a little bit of a pause between you and me as I keep interrupting you. Carry on.
It's all right. Because my shout out and callback when I'm in Panto, and I've done this same one for the last 10 years, I say, "How you doing, gang?" And they all shout back at me, "Mind your own business." And I go out and I set, and they love that, because they like that because they're getting to be cheeky with an adult, and they think that is brilliant.
Okay.
And and
But it's
I
part
go
of the
out.
game, though, isn't it? It's part of that
Yeah,
rapport that you're creating with them. That it's
yeah,
allowed to be cheeky.
yeah. You're allowed to make noise here. You're allowed to laugh. You're allowed to engage. Because I think I can always sense when the teachers have brought the kids in and shouted them into submission before the start of the show. Stop it! Stop making noise! Stop it! Don't do that! Don't do that! And that I can always tell when they've got teachers that have come in and they've just, like, sat them down, and you've got these kids going, and they and they're a bit scared to get engaged. But then it's a bit of a challenge because I get them going, and sometimes I might even say to them, have your teachers all told you to be quiet and behave yourself? And they go, yeah. I go, right, forget that.
But what you're saying, these points that you've underlined are just, I think, so fundamental, not only for teachers who are preparing a show with their students, or they're actually performing with it for their students, but also I keep going back to the classroom use, but I think what the points that you've made are so important also from a teaching point of view. I mean, one, you were saying about your energy of not being like, just going back to what you were saying, that not being like really, really over the top and like treating the kids like, yeah, I'm one of you, but just as you said, just a burning flame inside you, that's an energy that's carrying you forward. And the self-confidence, as you said, you mentioned the self-confidence. Kids can really, really sense if you are self-confident or if you're a little bit afraid of the situation. So they can read that from your body language, even without you even opening up your mouth. So I think those points are really, really important. And you also mentioned, so I'm just repeating what you were saying before, because I think they were really interesting points about repetition as well. About also, you're talking about plays, but when we're teaching also kids, stories that have lots of repetition that can also engage students in participating in a story or a play that you're actually, even a puppet play or something that you're performing with students. That idea of repetition is really good. And also allowing, the last thing that you mentioned, allowing students to actually be involved and participate with you, and not being afraid to open up their mouths and answer you and respond. And obviously we're talking about teaching in a different language, which is even more intimidating than in English. You're dealing with UK children. But I think those 4 points that you made are so interesting and important, and can be related also to teaching children a second language. So that is absolutely great. And let me just finish on the last note with because I know you have also a daughter who does she actually act in the pantos with you, or
She's been, yeah, well, she's a strange child, and when she was about 6,
poor
of course
daughter.
she's strange.
She's
Of course. When she was about 6, she said, it's not fair that she came to watch me in the pantos. She said, it's not fair that you get to do the pantos. And I said, well, it's my job. I've trained to be a performer. But I said, all right, well, listen. I said, we call them the juveniles, and we use local dance schools. You can join the dance school. If they think you're good enough to audition for the panto, because they only use 6 little girls, if they think you're good enough, then you can audition. But even then, there's no guarantee that you'll get in. But if you want to go through that process, I'm fine with that, because we're not pushy with her at all. And she said, yeah. And of course, then started 3 or 4 months ballet, tap, modern. They have to do all of that because they have to pick up routines really quickly. They've got a week. We only have 1 week to put a show together.
Oh my goodness. 1 week? I was about to share a photo of it, but then 1 week?
Yeah. From the day we meet to the day we go into technical rehearsals is 1 week. So by the end of that week, we have to be able to run the show with all the dance routines, all the comedy routines. Everybody's off script. So yeah, I learned that dance in a week. Luckily, they just put me in the middle. They danced around me.
But did your daughter actually get in the end? Does
She
she
got
actually
in.
do any panto? No.
She
Well
got
done.
in,
So you actually
and
do pantos with her?
I did 3 with her because at that point I was in a theatre locally in Rill, a big theatre there. So she did 3 of them, and she was great. She's great, and then I moved away to New Brighton with the same company, but slightly further away, and she didn't want to do it without doing it with me. But she
Oh,
still goes. She still goes to dance, and she still sings, and she did Macbeth with me a couple of years ago as well.
so something light then.
I know that's what I do love about my career, is that I get to do Panto at Christmas, but then I did Macbeth, but I did actually find some good gags in Macbeth as well. Only I could find jokes.
You made the whole audience laugh during Macbeth. I mean, that just shows your talent, though, doesn't it, Sean?
Well,
Let me just show a last picture. A last picture of you.
Go on.
This is you. Was this you during Macbeth?
Yes, that was the tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow speech. That was, yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I mean, these inflatable costumes are just absolutely amazing.
I mean, that's
And
great, isn't it? Because how subversive is that? It's me dressed as a Mexican riding Donald Trump.
Donald
I mean,
Trump. In
that's,
fact, I think it's that Donald Trump. Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
That if so, how political is that? You know.
No, absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, then you have the kids that don't understand the Donald Trump part, but they definitely understand this funny person riding
Well, do you know what's
the shoulders
do you know
of
what's really
somebody.
funny? Yeah, that's the other thing, is all about not underestimating the kids, because actually
Yeah.
they all knew Donald Trump, and it's like it's funny what goes on in the playground. I mean, they don't know they don't know the ins and outs of politics, but you know, I suppose the age range that we have coming to Panto is usually between 5 and 9, 5 and 8, 5 and 9. So actually, in the playground, Donald Trump is a figure of fun. I guess slightly like in the 1940s, all the kids would know who Hitler was. They all knew who was Winston Churchill was. And over, you know, so
in pantomime,
they,
you have those gags, you have the jokes that are politically in that moment,
yeah,
present in they're topical, let's say. So,
yeah.
but
And
let's
as
just
long
finish.
as it's gone,
Sorry.
as long as it's not sort of too kind of clever satirical stuff, it's making fun of people in power, you know,
Yeah.
and that's what kids go, oh, that's what's his face, that's oh yeah, he's the president, and they kind of know that, and then they feel dead clever as well.
Let me just finish with one more photo of you. I think I've already shown this one, but I mean, I think this is right at the beginning. We showed this. I mean, just the costumes, the lights, the scenery,
It just looks like
the
joy, doesn't it?
dance. It's just, yeah, it's just so engaging and so magical for young children. I think it's just absolutely amazing pantomime. Sean, I can't thank you enough for coming and telling us a little bit what pantomime is and a few of the secrets of how to captivate a young audience, whether you're performing on stage or whether you're actually teaching in a class to students who don't even understand a word of English. So I think those tips that you gave, those pointers can be really, really adapted to any teaching or performing situation that teachers or young actors are involved in. So thank you so much for sharing all of
You're
your
welcome. Thank you.
experience. It's been such a pleasure to see you again, Sean. And now we'll finish, and then I'll say goodbye to you in a second. So thank you all for following this interview with Sean Jones. And remember, until next time, be theatrical.